Before we begin, pause for just a second. If you want stories like this to keep finding you, then like and hit the subscribe button. And leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Now, turn the lights down, stay very still, and let the shadows take over. The coastal wind carried no comfort, only salt and an echo of the sea Elise had tried to leave behind. The sun rose over the museum's harbor, a calm, bright morning that felt like a lie. To everyone else, she was safe now, a survivor with a story no one fully believed. To Elise, the ocean had never released her, and the Arkite had never stopped watching. The first sign came in the mirror. Not her reflection exactly. Her eyes, slightly darker than normal, staring back with a faint shimmer, almost as if the sea itself lingered in their depths. She told herself it was exhaustion, the brain's aftereffects from trauma. But she knew better when the whisper followed her out of the bathroom. Almost ready? Her heartbeat jerked in her chest. The words were the same, impossibly faint, yet unmistakable, the voice neither male nor female, neither alive nor dead. It came from behind the mirror, from beneath the floorboards, from the water beneath the dock. Elise's hand trembled as she reached for the letter still tucked in her coat pocket, the one marked last. The paper felt warmer than it should, almost damp. She hadn't slept well for weeks. Dreams of black water, faces pressed upward, screaming without sound, and glimpses of the coiled organism haunted her nights. In every dream she floated closer to the rift, the abyss beneath the Arkite, and in every dream she woke with salt on her skin, wet but untouched by rain. Work at the museum was a distraction. Restoring salvaged artifacts, cataloging the ship's recovered logbooks. It should have been enough. But each page she turned whispered new questions. Every signature smudged by water, every entry cut short mid-thought, seemed like a trap set long before she arrived. The Arkite's patience was infinite. Its reach was patient, waiting for her to open her mind again. The first incident happened in the supply room. A small puddle pooled around her boots. Elise blinked. The pipes were dry, the air warm. Yet the water rippled, and faintly she could see faces beneath its surface, mouths moving, eyes wide, reaching. The soundless screams penetrated her mind, layering memory over memory, merging the drowned crew with those she had lost. By the afternoon, she realized the museum's harbor reflected more than the sky. Standing at the edge of the dock, she saw shapes beneath the water. Humanoids, pale, frozen in motion like the mannequins from the Arkite's lower decks. She gasped, stepping back, but the reflections followed her, twisting in unnatural rhythms, the water whispering her name. "You shouldn't have left," the voice said again, softer this time, coaxing. "We're still here, waiting." Elise staggered into the museum, her hands gripping the edge of the wooden railing, nails biting into varnish. She tried to rationalize, tried to convince herself that the Arkite was gone, that all of it had ended with the flare. But even as she spoke aloud, "It's over," the word sounded hollow. Her reflection in the exhibit glass smiled at her differently than she did, lips twitching independently. That night, she locked her apartment doors, triple-checked the windows. And still, water seeped up from the floorboards, cold and thick, smelling of brine and rust. The whispers didn't stop. They were patient, repeating, layering over the faint hum of the city. At first, they spoke in the voices of her lost crew, Tomas, Caleb, Silto, but soon, other voices emerged. Strangers, tourists, museum visitors she had never met. All calling her, all pleading, all claiming the water beneath the floorboards. She began leaving notes everywhere. Names, times, details of what she saw, hoping to anchor herself in reality. But the notes changed. Words she hadn't written appeared between the lines. "Join us. You belong. Don't resist." One morning she found a page she had never touched, folded neatly on her pillow. "The seed grows. It waits beneath the harbor." Elise tried to call for help. Psychologists, oceanographers, anyone who would listen. But whenever she mentioned the Arkite, the descriptions, the coiled organism, the rift, they smiled politely, dismissed her as suffering from trauma or stress. Nobody could see what she saw. Nobody heard the whispers. She was alone. Except, of course, for the Arkite itself. And it wasn't patient forever. It began showing up in her daily life in impossible ways. A reflection in a car window as she walked down the street, pale hands pressed against the glass of the museum's exhibit hall, water droplets dripping from nowhere onto polished floors. People she spoke to sometimes had hollow eyes, tiny black dots replacing pupils, voices warped for an instant, whispering her name before returning to normal. It learned. Every time she resisted, it tried another angle, infiltrating her senses, her reality, her memories. One evening she stood on the dock, staring at the harbor. The water was calm, almost placid. The sunset painted the waves in soft golds and reds. Yet beneath the surface she saw movement. Hundreds of pale faces, eyes wide, mouths open in silent screams, and at the center the coiled shape of the Arkite itself, pressing against the sea floor, pulsing with dark intelligence. She screamed and the water responded. Tiny waves licked her ankles, carrying voices that pleaded and threatened in equal measure. She fell back, knocking over crates of salvaged logs. One fell open to a page she didn't recognize, a drawing of a humanoid figure with multiple eyes, standing on the water, arms outstretched, a faint glow surrounding it. Below it, words in familiar handwriting, "It remembers you." By morning, Elise knew she couldn't stay. The Arkite had followed her across the sea, infiltrated her mind. Every waking hour, every reflection, every sound carried its presence. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a hallucination. It was the Arkite, learning to manifest beyond the hull, reaching for her through the water, through her thoughts, through the memories it had stored. She packed her coat, letters, and a few essentials. The harbor was empty, but the water rippled as if alive. Standing at the edge, she whispered to herself, "This ends now." The water answered. Something stirred beneath, massive, unseen, but present. A pulse ran through her chest, syncing with the rhythm of her own heartbeat. And then the whisper again, louder, closer, inside her own mind. One more. Elise swallowed, gripping the knife she always carried. She had survived the Arkite once. Somehow she would have to survive it again. But this time the game wasn't on the ship. This time it was everywhere, and she was already inside it. Elise drove north along the coast, headlights cutting through the early morning fog. The city behind her seemed unreal, distant, the normal world shrinking into something fragile and temporary. Every mirror, every reflective surface along the route teased her with movement, faces not her own, pale and silent, watching. She pressed her foot harder on the pedal, the engine's roar a small comfort against the whispers curling around her thoughts. Her destination wasn't entirely rational. A remote research facility, long abandoned, rumored to have connections to deep-sea salvage operations. If the Arkite could reach her here, it could reach anyone. She had to find a way to fight it, or at least understand it. The letter marked "Last" rested heavily in her pocket, the edges worn and damp. Its cryptic instructions had saved her once. Maybe it could save her again. She arrived at the facility just as the fog thickened, curling around rusted doors and shattered windows. Salt clung to the air, even inland, and Elise immediately sensed it, the subtle pulse like the heartbeat of the Arkite echoing through her veins. She tried to dismiss it. The pulse wasn't real. It wasn't. And yet, when she stepped inside, the building seemed alive. The floors creaked beneath her boots, the walls seemed to breathe, faint brine seeping through the cracks. Her first few hours were spent mapping the facility, taking notes, photographing the ruined consoles. Old sonar readings, broken monitors, and half-decayed logbooks littered the rooms. And everywhere, the water followed her. Not flooding, not spilling, just present. Puddles and corners shimmered unnaturally, faces moving just beneath the surface. She shook her head. "It's trying to unnerve me. It's just water." But the whispers returned, a chorus this time, 1,000 voices layered over one another, some screaming, some laughing, some pleading. "You left. You can't leave again." By evening, Elise realized the Arkite's reach had grown. Not only could it influence water, but reflections, shadows, even the spaces between the walls seemed permeated with its presence. A mirror in the hallway pulsed faintly, and for a second she swore she saw herself inside it, older, hollow-eyed, beckoning her forward. She had to fight it, or she would become what it wanted, a hollow memory, a vessel for its collection. Then came the first contact. A researcher, or at least what appeared to be one, stood at the end of a hallway, pale, drenched in brine, eyes black as ink. She froze, recognizing the posture, the tilt of the head, the smile. It was Tomas. But it wasn't Tomas. Orit raised a hand, motioning for her to come closer. "Don't," Elise whispered, backing up. The floor beneath her rippled as if it had its own consciousness. "Come," the figure said, voice layered with multiple tones, some hers, some not. "You are ready." The hallway stretched impossibly, elongating beyond the walls of the facility. Elise ran, knife clutched tight, but every corridor seemed to lead back to the same hallway, the same figure. Panic clawed at her chest. She remembered the rift, the coiled organism beneath the Arkite, the storm of voices that had tried to absorb her mind. And now it was here, in miniature, spreading, expanding beyond the ship into the world she thought she knew. Hours, or days, later she stumbled into the main lab. Ancient equipment lined the walls. Sonar arrays, deep-sea submersible consoles, and a tank of water she hadn't noticed before. The tank pulsed. Inside floated hundreds of tiny, pale shapes, indistinct, writhing like embryos in the dark. Her stomach twisted. The Arkite was growing, propagating, forming seeds. And the whispers confirmed it. One more. One more. One more. Elise realized she wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was bait. A lure. Every step, every decision she had made since escaping the Arkite had been watched, learned from. The coiled organism beneath the Arkite was no longer confined to the North Atlantic. It was sending fragments of itself, tiny extensions, into new territories. And they were hungry for her mind, for her memories, for her identity. The first seed attacked subtly. A reflection in a polished table moved independently, gesturing to her. When she looked away, it appeared elsewhere. When she slept, it invaded her dreams, whispering secrets of the deep, showing her glimpses of its vast network of collected minds. Faces of her friends, strangers, lost crews, all calling, screaming, pleading. She awoke soaked in water, her apartment's puddles now creeping into her shoes and clothes. By the second day, Elise felt her thoughts fragmenting. Flashbacks of the Arkite merged with her present reality. Tomas's face, Caleb's voice, even Silto's laughter, interwoven with her own, made it impossible to distinguish memory from manipulation. She began marking herself with symbols from the letter, small sigils on her wrists, ankles, anywhere she could. The markings burned faintly but reassured her. For now she could resist. Her phone rang. A number she didn't recognize, yet she instinctively answered. "Hello." Her voice trembled. "Elise," said a voice both familiar and alien. "Kill. Or at least a fragment of him. You have to stop it before it spreads further. You're the only one left who can fight it outside the ship." "Where are you?" Elise asked, panic surging. "Not where but when," the voice said. "The Arkite, it isn't just in water anymore. It uses memory, perception. It waits until you think you're safe." The line went dead. Elise had no choice. She had to track the seed to find its new anchors, and sever them before they multiplied. Each step was perilous. Every reflective surface, every shadow could be a conduit. Every drop of water could harbor a fragment of the Arkite's consciousness. By nightfall, she had mapped several locations where the seed had already taken hold. The harbor, the abandoned facility, a series of coastal research stations. If she could destroy these seeds, perhaps she could slow the Arkite's expansion, perhaps even sever its connection to her mind. But the whispers warned her. Every seed destroyed cost something in return: memories, identity, pieces of herself. The first seed she attacked was in the abandoned facility's submerged tank. Knife in hand, she plunged her arm into the water. Faces writhed against her skin, pulling at her mind, tugging memories loose. She gritted her teeth and drove the flare from the last letter into the tank. The water hissed, steam rising, the embryos convulsing and dissolving into pale mist. She pulled back, coughing, her mind foggy but intact. One seed destroyed, but she could feel another forming elsewhere. As she stepped outside, rain began to fall. Or maybe it was sea spray condensed from some invisible source. She couldn't tell anymore. And in the reflection of the puddles, she saw them. Hundreds of pale shapes beneath the water, watching, waiting, whispering. One more. Elise's jaw tightened. She had survived the Arkite once. She had resisted its invasion of her mind. But now the game had expanded beyond the ship, beyond the ocean. The seed was everywhere and she was alone. For the first time, she understood that surviving wouldn't be enough. She would have to strike at its heart. And that meant returning to the Arkite. Elise drove through the coastal fog, the night air thick and heavy with salt. Every reflective surface along the abandoned pier flickered with movement. Faces she recognized, faces she didn't, all watching, waiting. The Arkite's seed had spread farther than she imagined, threading into water, reflections, even shadows. Each whisper, faint at first, had grown into a chorus, filling her mind with memories that weren't hers. She gritted her teeth, clutching the letter marked "Last." It was the only tether to reality she still had. The rescue vessel that had found her years ago loomed faintly in her memory, but she knew she couldn't rely on help. The Arkite had taught her that. It didn't need to physically reach its victims. Its presence spread, and every mind it touched became a potential entry point. Her only chance was the Arkite itself. She would return to the North Atlantic, to the abyssal rift where the coiled organism waited, to the living ship that had consumed her friends. By dawn, she had reached a small dock with a weathered salvage craft. The fog clung to the surface of the water like a living thing, shifting and breathing. She could feel the pulse beneath her boots, the rhythm of the Arkite's heart echoing through the hull, through the sea itself. Every ripple carried memory, every wave whispered, "You are mine." One more. Elise secured the craft and boarded, steering toward the coordinates where the Arkite had first appeared. Hours passed in oppressive silence, broken only by the faint hum of the engine and the constant whispering in her mind. Shadows moved beneath the water, shapes that dissolved when she blinked. The storm above remained calm, unnaturally still. By the time night fell, the fog thickened into a solid wall, obscuring even the faint glow of her instruments. Then it appeared. The Arkite rose from the depths, larger than memory allowed, its hull no longer a ship, but a living, coiled mass of flesh and metal. Eyes dotted the surface like barnacles, glowing faintly as they tracked her every movement. The rift at the core pulsed, a wound in reality, and from it came the voices of every crew member it had consumed, Tomas, Caleb, Silto, and countless others, whispering, pleading, laughing. Elise felt their presence in her mind, but she pressed forward. The letter burned faintly in her pocket, reminding her of the flare that had destroyed the ship's core before. She had to strike at the heart, not just the seed, not just the fragments. She had to end it here, or it would consume everything. Boarding the Arkite was worse than she remembered. The gangplank felt alive beneath her feet, pulsing in rhythm with the creature beneath. The deck water rose to her knees, then her waist, carrying fragments of memories and echoes of her friends. Faces emerged from the waves, silent, empty-eyed, reaching for her. Elise clutched the knife and pressed on, chanting the words from the letter to steady her mind. The bridge had transformed completely. No longer a room, it was a cavern of pulsating flesh, metal, and water suspended in midair. The core's rift shimmered at the center, and within it, the coiled organism waited. Thousands of eyes blinked in unison, observing her, weighing her, knowing her. She felt the pull on her mind, memories not her own crawling into her consciousness. Panic clawed at her, but she forced herself forward. "Caleb," she whispered. The memory of him surged in her mind, and for a moment she felt his presence. "Fight it," the echo urged. "Do not let it take you." She set the flare from the letter on the control panel, igniting it. The light reflected across the water, casting a red glow on the living walls. The Arkite shrieked, a sound that bent space, rattled metal, and split the echoes of the whispers into 1,000 fractured screams. The coiled organism thrashed, pulsing violently, eyes rolling as if in agony. The water surged upward, dragging her into the rift. Memories and voices clawed at her mind, but she tightened her grip on her identity, repeating her name like a mantra. "Elise. I am Elise. I am Elise." The entity recoiled, shrieking in fury, trying to erase her from the storm of consciousness. She plunged the flare into the rift. The liquid boiled around her, screaming faces twisting and dissolving into nothingness. The hull groaned violently, walls tearing apart as the Arkite convulsed. For the first time she saw it, not just as a ship, not just as an organism, but as a predator, ancient and patient, feeding on memory and identity, spreading like a disease across the sea and beyond. The coiled organism writhed, rising from the rift, and she felt tendrils of thought snake into her mind. It wanted to absorb her completely. She resisted, clawing at the edges of her consciousness, gripping the flare like a lifeline. Fire ignited the core, and the rift began collapsing, swallowing the coiled organism into itself. The deck buckled, water pouring from every crevice, and the Arkite's scream pierced her skull, a sound of centuries compressed into seconds. She leaped from the collapsing deck, plunging into the freezing Atlantic, the flare still clutched in her hand. The explosion of red light erupted behind her, sending a shockwave across the water. She sank into the abyss, pulled by the ocean's grip, and felt the last tendrils of the Arkite's influence detach from her mind. For a heartbeat, the world was silent, calm, still. When she surfaced, the Arkite was gone. No wreckage, no floating debris, just the endless, indifferent Atlantic. Fog had lifted, and the stars reflected perfectly on the water's surface. She was alone, truly alone, and for the first time in months she could hear her own heartbeat, her own thoughts, unsullied by the whispers of the collected dead. Elise drifted until dawn, then swam to a nearby island. Exhausted, hypothermic, but alive. She wrapped herself in a salvaged blanket, holding the letter close, still damp, still burning faintly with the memory of fire and resistance. She realized something terrifying yet liberating. The Arkite had been defeated, but only temporarily. Its seeds might have been destroyed, its rift collapsed, but the ocean was vast and fragments of its memory could linger anywhere. She would have to remain vigilant. She would have to remain alone. Years passed. Elise rebuilt her life quietly, avoiding mirrors, avoiding the sea. Yet in her dreams she still heard the whispers, faint and distant, reminding her that memory is never truly erased. One night she awoke to a dripping sound. Heart racing, she glanced at her reflection in a window. The glass was normal, calm, but in the corner, a pale shape watched her, its black eyes unblinking. It was gone when she blinked. The Arkite's reach had been curtailed, its heart burned, but the seed remained, scattered like spores across the world. And she knew, with a certainty she could not shake, that one day it would rise again. But until that day she would fight. She was Elise. She had a name. She had survived. And she would never answer the whispers again.